and their address. They have struck and address. This, again, I think we want to know their address because we do want to know to what extent they're employing Odessa residents.
Is this for confidentiality purposes? Do you
I'm
know?
sure that that's why they struck it, but
It's not okay.
we need it. And if they don't want to supply the name along with the address, I think that's fine. We need to know where they're, if it's, they
Employee
don't want to
number, such and
provide
such.
us with that,
They have a unique identification number there,
Okay.
so.
something that's not personally identifiable information that could be used in an identity theft,
Okay,
that may be why, but I think we do want the address.
okay.
Would it be sufficient to put in Odessa rather than their whole address? What if their check goes to their home in Houston, but they're living down here? They haven't moved yet?
Well, I guess that's a difference between whether or not they're a resident of Odessa or not.
Okay.
And we'd like them to be a resident of Odessa.
Okay.
We understand that that's not something that is always 100% achievable. The next thing I flagged is that they've struck the insurance paragraph.
The reason they did that, this is outside counsel, and Oxy is self-insured, and he said it would be impossible to get something to show that they were insured. I told him, no, it's not. I've worked for oil companies before. They usually have something that's just one page that's printed.
I mean,
So he was unfamiliar with.
since a huge part of this grant is their $810 million capital investment, we need to know that that's insured.
Agreed.
They can get us something. He was just unfamiliar.
I mean, if there's some revision they want to this language, I think we're open to looking at it, but
Typically, to be self-insured, don't they have to post a certain bond or something with the state
I mean, there's
to
got
do
to
that?
be.
I think proof of that would probably help suffice.
We need something that shows that the capital investment, which is a cornerstone of this agreement,
Protected.
is covered by insurance.
Great.
The next thing I flagged is down in section 5.8. Under assignment.
Here, there is we did discuss that. They want to be able to move it to one of their wholly owned subsidiaries from whatever it's called now, without having to go through the process. They won't transfer it to anyone else, he said. That's not the way it's written.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm fine with all of that. What I'm not okay with is here in the last sentence, ODC expressly consents to any assignment described in the immediately preceding sentence and agrees no further consent of ODC to such assignment will be required. Strike out that sentence and just as long as, we're already saying that written consent won't be unreasonably withheld. So I think that that's sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to put something in there that they can transfer this at our approval. This
That's
is a
what-
joint contract.
without-
Can't be unilateral. They say, look, we're just gonna transfer this to somebody else.
Without that sentence, that's what it says.
Okay.
It says that it requires it requires the prior consent of ODC, which consent will not be unreasonably withheld, delayed, or conditioned. That's appropriate contractual language. And that's what we see in these types of contracts for assignment frequently.
So, define for me an unreasonable consent. And you're just educating me a
Obviously,
little
that
bit.
would be a litigated issue.
So,
If,
give me
if-
some examples.
If you're just like, we're not gonna consent to it because we don't want to, that's not reasonable.
Okay, but we may consent to it and say, okay, look, this defeats our whole purpose for whatever reason.
If we have a reasonable reason not to consent to the transfer of the assignment, then we obviously would not consent.
Okay, if they wanted to argue it, they'd have to take it to court.
At that point, it's litigated.
Okay,
I agree, taking out that sentence.
Okay, the next thing that I flagged is down in 5.15.2.
I had something before.
Oh,
that.
good, okay, tell me.
I had something under 5.14 default on the second page where it says, the company may declare a default hereunder by ODC if ODC refuses or neglects to comply with any of the terms of this agreement. If company declares ODC to be in default to this agreement, company shall notify ODC in writing of such default, and if such default is not cured within 60 days from the date of such notice, company shall have the right to pursue any remedy at law or in equity for ODC's breach thereof.
I mean, if we're in breach of the, I don't,
I mean, it's
I
just
don't have a
added.
quibble with it.
Okay.
What
I
are you
mean,
thinking, Jan?
What it means is,
They can sue us if they don't think that we're complying with the contracts.
what it mean, well, except
able
that
to do that
they
anyway.
have to give us written notice and say, we think ODC's in default of the contract and here's why.
Give us 60 days.
We have
to
60
remedy.
days to resolve it, and if we don't resolve it, at that point, it can be litigated.
It's fair, but it's new. That's right.
It's new, but it's not anything that I think is unusual.
Good.
Okay. I'm trying to remember why I flagged this. Optional termination 5.15.2.
Because it's unilateral.
In the event company determines that it will not proceed with blah, 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 has the right to terminate the agreement. Yeah, I think that my issue is that on our side, if we terminate it, we don't have the same escape clause that they do.
And also, they just stop it after several years. There is no clawback provision.
That's one of my questions.
So the thing with the clawback provision, and Mr. Boutin, remind me if I'm wrong. Previously, the clawback provision was used in events where a grant was paid up front, and then the grantee didn't live up to their obligation, then ODC could claw back the funds.
Correct.
We no longer pay any grants up front.
We'll pay them in arrears.
So, any amounts paid are gonna be paid, they're gonna be earned.
And this
So I
contract
don't-
doesn't start till they're up and running, correct?
That's correct. Well,
But
it
that's what I
says, yeah, their commencement,
Yeah, they
begins-
They define it
yeah.
in there.
When they're up and
so
running.
we wouldn't pay them anything until they've earned it. At that point, we'd have a hard time clawing it back anyway, in my opinion.
You know, because part of mine is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, what kind of property tax abatements did the county, the city, the hospital district already do on this project? Because a large part of our grant's the capital piece, but they're getting 10-year tax abatements, right?
So what happens if in year 5, they say, we're leaving the area? I mean, the capital investment has been made at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it.
Excuse me, could you come to the podium, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's my fault.
I mean, they only get paid for what they've done.
What they've earned.
But our whole point for the capital investment piece, you know, great, it's having buildings and equipment, all that out there.
Sure.
But so they paid something back into the system in form of property taxes. So we're giving them a 10-year tax abatement. At year 5, it takes 5 years to commence. At year 5, they start and get into it. At the end of year 5, which is their 10th year, their tax abatement ends, and they say, hey, we're done, we're pulling out.
Okay,
They
but
haven't paid in any property
they
taxes.
would still own the property,
Yes, they would.
and they would still owe the taxes on the property.
Well, I mean, at this point, not necessarily. If they sell the property to somebody
Well,
else.
then that person they sell it to will owe the taxes on the property.
File bankruptcy and shut it, because remember, this is a separate entity other than
Whoever
Oxy.
owns the property will owe the taxes.
What if they file bankruptcy on this particular entity? What happens?
Well, now you're getting
That's bankruptcy
out ahead of me as
law.
far as bankruptcy law, yeah.
You know, taxes
question I
aren't
have-
necessarily forgiven.
Do you know
In bankruptcy.
specifically what the tax abatement time period was on this particular project?
I believe, with the exception of one taxing entity
Okay.
Who was that entity, school district?
No, well, yeah, the school district, they're on a 313 agreement,
That's
which is
10.
different. The other entities are on 312s, but I believe, the hospital district does something a little similar to what you may call a pilot, which is an acronym for payment in lieu of taxes. So they've worked out an amount with the district, and that's what, the entity would pay the hospital district is the amount that they negotiated.
So not being a bankruptcy practitioner, I can't tell you whether or not taxes are forgiven in bankruptcy, but I don't believe,
We
mean,
can find out.
you know,
Well, in this
we can do a
particular-
Google,
In this
but-
particular case with the,
You know, because the other
I
thing
guess
is,
the-
what also happens if, they have transfer clauses in here. If we want to transfer this grant to another subsidiary or affiliate, as they put it, then how does that affect in our
The-
situation with the game?
well, it would require our consent.
and they would, that point have to assume all the obligations of the agreement. So I guess my point here is, in this particular case, with the substantial financial capability of Oxy, we have a 5-year agreement. They complete the project in 5 years, and they get paid because they've earned our grant funds. The likelihood of them folding up is pretty remote. So, and again, they've lived up to the terms of the contract. From a taxing perspective, I think that's just a different issue, and that would have to be taken up by the city, the county, the school districts and whatnot. So I think all we can really control is our grant funds.
I mean, I don't think that we'd have a legal ability to claw back earned funds. I just don't.
Yeah.
Can we, when you talk about it being a unilateral, can we change the wording where this is,
Absolutely.
either one of us could do this?
And so, yeah, I don't think it's a question of clawing back earned funds. I mean, if they've hired the employees, they've met the criteria,
Built the building.
you know, built the
whatever.
buildings, you know, that's
Plan.
cool. Our main thing is, you know, creating the jobs and the employees anyway, but, you know, and I'm with you, if it's earned, it's hard to claw back. I'm just trying to foresee things that could happen
Sure.
to where it wouldn't be earned.
One of the best things that ODC ever did was make the decision to pay grants in arrears
Absolutely.
only to pay for earned, funds. I feel comfortable with that in that regard. I'm not concerned that, I mean, if they earn the funds because they make the $810 million capital investment, either they or somebody else will own that property and will continue to generate taxes, barring some kind of,
I like this one
Difficult
better
to
because
predict.
it is based on FTEs. Our payments are based on
Yeah.
that as opposed to the Nacero project, which is based on capital. And there's a big question I know we're gonna talk about in a little bit as far as what constitutes capital improvements. So, you know, I feel way better about this one than I do the other one. But is there anything that we can do to shore that up as far as, and I think maybe you have. I thought really interested now that I think about what you've done. Because if it's earned, I'm okay with it. And it's easier to show that it's earned with employees than it is with the capital investments.
I mean, I don't know what you wanna shore up. There's not anything in here that's based on, where they, I mean, we're saying they're gonna make the capital investment.
As long as they hire the
But-
employees, they're good. And pay them, obviously, but.
And
Yeah.
provide evidence that they built what they said they were gonna build
Right.
within the timeframe.
Well, again, this is all based on FTEs more so than anything else. I mean, you know, when we're paying out our grant, in the first year, they have to have 25 FTEs. You know, it shows that they have
Sure.
to, you know, I know that's all based on, they have to have done at least 810 million, first thing. And then after that, it's, you know, once that's done, then 25 and then 50, 75 and so on. So you know, then the bigger deal is just to make sure, again, that the salary and payroll is for Odessa employees, not
That's,
outside.
yeah, that's my concern, and what I want to see clarified is that there's not going to be games played with the employee numbers by moving
I agree.
existing Ector County employees for other and I don't think that's anybody's intention, but I
It's
just
our
want-
job to protect.
Exactly, it's our job to eliminate that possibility,
Yes, ma'am.
in my opinion.
I agree.
Now, those are just the things that I flagged, so there may be some other things that legal wants us to discuss, or that y'all noted that y'all wanna discuss.
Are you fine with the attorney's fees under 5.22?
I mean, it didn't look like an unusual provision to me.
I need to check to make sure that that's even possible, that they can get them from us as a government entity.
Okay.
I'll let you know on that one. And that's all.
Question is, you know, just to basically prevent a summit type deal, do we have any provisions in here that would keep us from having monies reserved in perpetuity? Or for
So,
long periods of time? Is
I know
there-
we talked about this briefly. The issue with Summit and the issue with contract clauses that the contract automatically terminates on filing of bankruptcy is that it's not legally enforceable. You can't really get an enforceable agreement to do that.
But if we had
So-
that terminology, they'd have to litigate it, right,
What
to make us
what
do
we'd
it?
have to do is the same thing we'd have to do anyway, which is, we have to petition the bankruptcy judge to terminate the contract and pour it out of the bankruptcy estate.
But wouldn't it be easier if we had that terminology in the contract that said, in the event of bankruptcy, contract terminates and no future
It
funding
wouldn't
is?
be easier or harder, it would just be the same.
I'd feel better if it was in there.
Then we can put it in there. What we can't, I mean, sometimes people will put in contracts that they automatically terminate upon a bankruptcy filing. Those aren't legally enforceable. So I don't see any point in us putting something like that in here.
I think it keeps honest people honest in some way to let us unreserve those
Well, I don't know
funds.
that it's,
We had
in my
funds
opinion,
reserved,
I
$5
don't,
million for years
I don't
that
know
shouldn't
that
have
it's
been reserved.
honest to put an illegal provision in a contract. Something we know we can't enforce.
I won't sit as an illegal provision, you know.
It's not legally
Whether-
enforceable.
How-
It's an invalid
Cindy, do
provision.
you remember how long we, after the
We put that in
Summit
the Minnesota
bankruptcy,
agreement.
our $5 million was still reserved? Until we made the decision not to remove it from reserve funds?
We had to wait for the order from the bankruptcy judge.
It was probably like 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
Didn't we put a provision similar to that in the Nacero contract though?
We talked about it then too.
Yeah,
We had this
determined it's
conversation
not legally
then.
enforceable, there's no reason to put it in there.
I don't,
Yeah,
for one thing, putting invalid provisions in a contract is not a good practice because it calls into question other portions of your contract.
What can we do?
but I would
Is there a
also,
way that we can unreserve
We can-
funds if
what
we see the
we
contract
can't-
not go
we-
under
We will
provision?
have to petition the bankruptcy court to exclude that contract from the bankruptcy estate, and we just have to wait. That's
But-
our legal recourse.
but what we could, but I think what we could do, so tell me this, is there any reason why if there's a bankruptcy, and obviously I don't think we're necessarily talking about Oxy, but we're talking about potential, other contract.
But we're not talking about
grantees.
Oxy. We're talking about, what is it, P1?
P1, yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
We're not. Oxy may be a parent, but we're not talking about Oxy.
Well, be that as it may, I think there's a lot of financial capability behind this project. But in the event that there was a bankruptcy involved, at that point, and we had funds reserved, I think we could determine, that we can unreserve the funds.
No. There's a,
On our
there's a,
financials.
with a bankruptcy, there's an automatic stay, which any creditor or any person in a contract with subject who's filed for bankruptcy is not allowed to take any action that is considered detrimental to the bankruptcy estate. Okay? You can't take action against them, we can't sue them, we can't do any of those things. So we have to wait for our contractual obligation to be terminated before we would unreserve those funds.
So
That's
what
the
if they
only
just never
prudent thing
build the
to do.
facility?
Well,
You know what I mean? Obviously, we haven't paid anything out, but we still have,
We've got
we still
in
have money
here-
reserved.
What does it
But
say?
they
What's
just,
the-
they never complete the
Donation.
construction
We've got a drop
because,
dead date in here.
that's what I was looking for. I'm sorry, I missed that. I was looking for a drop dead date.
Yeah.
What is where is it?
I think it's in, 2.2 or 2.3.
It says that they'll take every effort to do, let me find it.
I think it's in 2.2.
I see the commencement date. 5 years from the consent. Shall be for a term of 5 years from the commencement date unless sooner terminated by mutual agreement.
It says, shall expire on the later of,
June 30th, immediately following the end of the 5th year of the employment obligation period. But what if the employment obligation period never starts?
there's another place in here where it says that they'll endeavor to have done X, Y, Z by so-and-so date. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yes.
But if they don't do it, because they're gonna endeavor to, but they don't do it,
Well, I don't know that it specifically says endeavor, I'm
But it also
summarizing, I'm
says
looking
they'll-
for the provision.
yes, ma'am.
They'll commence construction of the project within 1 year after the effective date. So there's that's when the capital,
That's when
Starts.
when it starts.
when it starts.
No, I thought the commencement date was, shall mean the 5-year period beginning on the January 1st, immediately following the date on which the project
I know,
becomes
I did
commercially
too.
operational.
But
So
this
that,
says.
I read that as the facility's up and running, not we started construction.
Yeah, but this also, I mean, there are defined dates in there that they're gonna have to meet that prevents this from, any issues from occurring in perpetuity. That's, I guess, the point I'm trying to make.
But what I'm saying is if you never have a commencement date, okay, yes, we never paid anything out, but we still have money reserved. So we need something in here that
Yeah,
says,
but-
okay, if you don't commence and the contract doesn't start, then
Yeah, but
contract terminates and we can unreserve our
But you're,
funds.
you're conflicting the two terms, commencement date and effective date. The project has to commence construction within 1 year after the effective date. The effective date of the contract is when it's executed, right?
That's correct.
And what happens if they don't do that?
Then
And
they're
they're
in
in breach.
breach and we can terminate.
Okay. And then we gotta appeal to the bankruptcy, or not bankruptcy, we can
Only
just
if
terminate.
they've-
We can and we can unreserve our funds.
If they have not filed bankruptcy, we can
Right.
terminate.
Okay,
If they have filed for bankruptcy, it's
Then
more
we have to go through that
complicated
court.
than that.
okay. That was my deal, is if the commencement date never starts, then we have to build unreserve our funds. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions,
I did have,
comments?
I did have one thing on 2.4.1. It says, they'll make commercially reasonable efforts to advertise for bids for people to be employed here, which may be provided through publication on its official website. On
I didn't like that.
a regular form, they have to do, advertise for jobs in the paper and different other places. They've shortened it to just on their website.
And
Good
that's
point. I
in
didn't like
somewhere
that.
else too.
Well,
It's also in point 2.
Uh-huh.
So for employment and for local contractors, they've narrowed it to their website. I mean, I didn't have a particular issue with it, but I think that's up to the board. Do you want them to advertise anywhere besides their website for, where do you want them to?
Just what we've had in the past.
Other language?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay,
Also, did we get a definition of compensatory time? This is
No.
an issue I ran into on one of our compliance committee contracts as far as what we define as compensatory time.
Did we settle that in our language on our,
it's not, it doesn't look like it's defined term there, let me look in the other.
while they're.
Is it pay, I mean, that implies to me that it's paid time off. Right? That they're being,
I don't know, I'd like to see a definition,
Okay.
you know, and not vacation time, not time for moving, not
this is vacation,
housing
sick leave
allowance,
already in.
cell phone allowance.
I don't know why you don't include those.
You know, I think in the past, didn't we define it as anything that would show up on a W-2 or
Yeah.
1099 or?
Yeah, if they're getting
Yeah, I think, isn't that what we use as all earnings anyway? It's just if it shows up on their quarterly 941 or W-2, we consider that as income.
Yeah. Which auto allowance and stuff is supposed to.
it is. And it should, because those are competitive wages.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of the competitive wages, so they
Yeah,
should.
I have no problem with that, as long as it's showing up
Yeah,
and.
should. Anybody else have any, Larry?
Are there any others?
I think I had a couple of others.
All right.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Some of these we've already answered, though. So, in 2.5 for investment, we're talking about the 810 million.
Mhm.
I think I saw it, but I'm kind of doubting myself now. Is there anything that clearly states that this 810 million will be at this project site? And when basically we
So
can't
it-
use design work
You
for
see where
multiple
it says
sites.
project with a capital P at the end of that sentence?
The company wants to expand, capital operate
Construction of the capital P project.
of the project.
Okay, go up to the top,
Okay.
go up to the beginning of the contract
Where they define project?
where they define
Okay,
project.
thank you.
And it says, blah, 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 direct air capture plant on land located in Ector County as more fully described on attachment A. So we'll wanna make sure that attachment A has the legal description of the property, and then we're fine.
Yeah, because when they finalize, we'll get a final copy of the contract before we approve all this, right? Okay. And so one of the other things that I would like to see is, you know, they refer to 810 million as an investment cost. Is there any way we could link that to taxable value as opposed to investment cost? Because again, it goes to what our appraisal district can levy taxes in, so they're paying into the system.
I think that we would have needed to do that a long time ago when they were coming up with their numbers.
Well,
Why not?
I don't know that you could ever control the appraised value.
No, it's mean taxable value. Because again, this
Yeah,
means,
but
because we're
that's
coming
what-
into
but
pulling
again-
payroll
but
into taxable value
again-
and all these
Well,
things.
and all of
I'm
that is
referring
supposed to be
I'm
capitalized.
referring to taxable value. The appraisal district determines what that taxable value is based on what they consider an appraised value. I don't know how you control that.
And that's the
Because
question,
as
is
the
what can they
economy-
use to
As-
determine
as the
an appraised
economy goes
value?
up and down, I don't know how you control that. Because they could overbuild it and it's not worth that much. They could underbuild it and it's worth a heck of a lot more. You know, I don't know how you control that.
I mean, I think that
That's
there's
what I don't think
significant
it's
upfront
enforceable.
cost when you undertake a project like this in design and engineering.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they shouldn't be allowed to include that in their capital investment.
My point is, I don't know how you could enforce it. You might put something in there of taxable value, but we have no control over what the taxable value is.
Correct, nor do they.
Right.
Only the state of Texas appraisal districts, the county or city does it.
That's a crapshoot.
Yeah, so,
Well, that, and you got,
But
and every year you
but
got
tr-
depreciable assets
Yeah,
that
but-
drop the taxable
but
value.
traditionally, it's not, particularly within the last 10 years, it's not that far off. 30 years ago, it was way far off. You know, it's typically they were undervalued in order to keep the taxes low, so but that's changed.
Let's see, I think in a lot of these we've covered, but
That's it for me.
question about the insurance, just like yours.
I want our credit for contract law. We got a guy from UTPB sign off on it.
Okay, I think that's all my questions.
Tim has none? No, anything
I'm
else?
fine.
Those were the things that I noted.
Miss Muncy, just raise your hand.
I just want to address the idea of using an identifying number. The reports that they're referring to would be reports that are going to your audit team or whatever that's doing the compliance monitoring. Typically, when they look at 941 reports, those have names on them, okay? They don't have that identifying number, okay? So if you have an employee number, the TWC report requires you to list out all the employees, and that's done by first initial, first name, and last name. So there may be a little bit of a problem there. Is there some way to just put it where it's kept in confidentiality?
It doesn't, my issue is they're wanting to remove the address
That's it.
information. I mean,
The only thing there is if you make them put, that, the city and the state and the zip code rather than the actual address location. So
and
is
that would probably,
sufficient for the
I
board?
think that'd be fine. It may be that they have an internal privacy policy that they commit that they
And
will
I
or will
agree.
not share this or that. So we
And I
don't want
agree.
them to conflict with that, but as long as we get city, county, and state, I think that we're fine.
Is that acceptable
Yep.
to the
We
rest?
just wanna know that they're here.
Yep. I mean, it's good for me. I don't have any
Okay,
issue.
thank you.
Any other comments or questions? So I guess you have clear direction with regard to the changes
Yes,
that
sir.
you need to make?
Between Tina and I and the recording of this,
Okay,
we should be good.
perfect.
And we'll let you know as soon as we can, hopefully the next meeting.
Okay,
I don't think my notes will be useful to you, but I can send them to you if you want
I'd
them.
appreciate it.
Okay.
all right, let's go to the contractors' reports, economic development, Tom.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You will see our report, I guess they're about the third page in, no, fourth page in. The first three projects are all local that were identified when we were doing business retention expansion visits. Project Pump, Project Castle, and Project Faldry. Like a lot of our projects, these are we're in the process right now chasing them down to get the applications in. We've sat down with them, we've met them, we know what they're trying to do with any type of expansion and job creation. Just getting the reports or the application in is like pulling teeth. Project Ophelia, the fourth down, that's a solar project. They're preparing their application, and we're going to be meeting with them again in the first quarter of '23. I believe we're going to set up meetings with the taxing entities with regards to some potential 312 agreements there. And then Project Lithium is an exciting one. As you can see, that's a pretty big project. Could be 1,000+ jobs, $1 billion+ capital expenditure. We now have them coming into town in December, their CEO and COO, for a site visit. They'll be here with us a couple of days. So when you have a project of that size, it's always pretty exciting to be getting them into the community. And then we'll be putting them with the appropriate people in visits upon that deal. Rocket, no new
information on that. I'll just go through a couple more of these. Frost, I actually called them this morning, and they are coming to town next week with application in hand to go over it. That's a pretty good size. That's I believe now they're talking, it says here $300 to $350 million investment, I think now, because they're including carbon capture in their manufacturing process. That's now a $400 to $500 million project, and so that's grown. Not a big job creator, but it will modernize a facility and keep it here the next 50 years. And then the other big one, Project Legion. That's pretty exciting. We met with them earlier in the week. We've started the process with discussions with the taxing entities with regards to 312 agreements. And so we're getting that up and going, and they've already got their 313 approved on that. As y'all well know, that's the incentive through putting a cap on property tax with regards to the school district, and they're sunsetting that December 31st, but you had to get it's about a 6-month review process with the comptroller's office, and so if you didn't have that in by last 2 weeks of May, you're out of luck. And so fortunately, the guys we're working with right now that wanted to do 313s got them in, and from what it looks like, most of them are approved. Moving past that, you will see further back some of our partner visits and other things we've got working on, page 6, page 7. And then on page, it's not numbered, but if you turn that and go to page 8, you'll see our marketing activities. We've taken over the vast portion of social media, and we tried to put that in an easy reporting fashion as far as who's looking at us and what they're looking at. You'll see our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Now, we'll ask you, with regards to followers, it's people that have actually clicked on and say, I want to follow you on those things. Raise your hand if you have any one of those deals, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. All right. Now raise your hand if you follow all 3 of those for the ODC. Shame on you.
We'll have Twitter.
Shame. So I won't call you out anymore. I bet now you'll go home and do it, though. But I just want to make mention of that. We're going to see if we can get those numbers to increase every month. As you see, we've got 3,100 followers on Facebook, 1,100 Instagram, 1,000 and something on Twitter. But hopefully, the more people that are looking at us and finding out about us, the better it is for us. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Tom, you
Yes, sir.
mentioned sunsetting on that commission. Does that mean it will go away, or is it?
Yeah, it's already
in the
been
process?
sunsetted. Like
It's already gone through
December
the sunset
31st,
process.
it's done.
Okay.
But the
Now-
legislature already has it scheduled to bring back up to put it back in force,
There,
right?
there will probably be a different version.
That's what I was curious. Sometimes when it goes through sunset, it's
yeah.
not complete yet. That's what I was curious about.
We've talked to our representatives here, Senator-elect Sparks and Representative Landgraf, and they know where we're at with that. I think there's one of the debates you're going to find is some areas of the state need that less than other areas. And I would say that Odessa and Ector County need some type of 313 pretty bad. Right now, Project Lithium, we're told we're the only community they're talking to. But I know at some point there's going to be others, because somebody's going to go, why are we talking to getting the best deal out there? And property taxes in Texas are high, and the school districts are always the highest. And so without some sort of incentive like 313 was, that puts us at a bit of a disadvantage. Any other questions?
Anything else for Tom? Thank you, Tom.
Thank y'all very much.
CBA, Craig?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Afternoon.
Glad to be here. Activities through CVA through the end of the year continuing, but strictly with outdoor and newspaper. Those are contracts that we have going on a month-to-month basis and can be terminated at any time. Did want to mention one project that Mr. Mansky has asked us to be involved in. We are working with he and Ms. Simpkins on a video for showing the properties that are available in Odessa and where they're located in relationship to rail, airport, highways, and those type of things. They'll be shooting in the probably in the next month, which is not the prettiest time to be shooting in West Texas. However, CVA has access to a lot of clips that have been shot for unique events that can't be done in the next 2 weeks. The Odessa Permian Game, the Permian Basin Fair, the Permian Basin Oil Show, and we'll provide those video clips for that to be worked with as well. In Permian Fuels America, activity was down slightly, but we did have a large increase in the month of September, so that was not totally unexpected. So that's my report, unless you have questions you'd like to ask.
Any questions, comments? Thank you,
Okay.
Craig.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chris, Black Chamber?
Good evening to everyone. We'll make this short and sweet. Pretty much, we'll start with our website and our social media event activity. We're pretty fortunate to see an increase, and I think a lot of this was due to our upcoming Ebony Bar Awards, which went very well. We were able to sit down with the companies that we discussed last meeting on as far as some of these organizations and their funding that we requested, and we put that. So we were able to sit down and touch base with them, and I asked all of the gentlemen, all of the businesses to get me even more information so that we can kind of stockpile that information so we can bring you that as well. We have, on tomorrow, as a matter of fact, we will be feeding families that are in need. As a matter of fact, when I leave here, I'll go help box groceries, and I mowed the yard earlier. So my day is getting pretty boring, so. But if you know any families that are in need of any supplies, food, we're going to have a activity in December that we're going to feed, clothe, give food, because we still have families with issues and that are still struggling. So we're going to be working with the Woodson Boys Club. They're going to do their teddy bear mobile, where they give gifts to some of the children that attend there and their families that may be struggling. So you can kind of see the theme that we're taking, that we're trying to, being around the holidays, we're trying to do as much help and lending a hand as we can. If it be giving out food, giving out help, assisting, we are going to, as a matter of fact, we're going to do a feed there at our church in December as well to do some of this. So we're reaching out to the community. We have a tournament that's coming up the end of this month, a domino tournament. All of the proceeds will be given to two organizations to help them kind of do some repairs on some of their facilities that are in need of some upkeep. So pretty much we're just trying to lend a hand and do some help. Any questions?
Questions, comments, Chris?
Thank you so
Thank you
much
very
for
much.
your time.
Tyler, SBDC?
Good afternoon. Good to be with you again. I know you have the report in your packet, but I want to walk through it just a little bit, if that's all right. So in the month of October, we had 365 counseling sessions that resulted in 348 counseling hours. So it was a really busy month. We're just now catching our breath a little bit. We did 3 seminars with 82 attendees. Those 3 seminars were how to build a business plan, creating a budget, which was sponsored by the Black Chamber of Commerce, and fraud prevention. We had 2 new businesses, One of those new businesses was in Odessa, and one expansion, which was also in Odessa. So the industries for the two new businesses one was a trucking company and the other was a daycare. So pretty typical for our type of clients. The expansion was a safety consulting company. So again, pretty typical for our type of clients. Capitalization for the month was a little over $1 million, with about $700,000 of that coming from Odessa companies. 27.5 new FTEs. Those came from it came from several companies, but one being a medical clinic, which was the largest number, and another one was a pharmacy. So those were the two largest contributors to that increase in FTEs month over month. For November, we have two workshops. We have How to Start Your Own Business, which actually was held today. It started at 2 o'clock, so I haven't seen the results of that one yet. And Creating Financial Projections, which is next week. And then we'll be closed for part of Thanksgiving week, but back at it the following week. Any questions?
Tyler, have you had a lot of interest in the financial projections?
Yes, that one usually does very well.
Yeah.
Usually get 15 to 20 people, depending on what else is going on. Sometimes we have other programs going on, and people in those programs will just sign up for that as well, just to get more help. So, for example, in October, business plan, that was by far the most popular, the one with the most people that showed up or came to. That's primarily because we have some business plan stuff going on with clients. So they all, kind of want to double up. So kind of feeds itself. We just finished the Frost Business Builder program. It was very successful once again. They do a great job with it. We participate. We put our clients into it. They have talked to us actually about more than doubling the number of clients we put into it next year. So I'm hoping that comes to fruition. That'd be great. It's great financial boot camp, if you will. They cover more things than just finance, but that's part of it. So it's a great financial boot camp for those type of clients. And then we're going to start the Small Biz Accelerator once again, probably after the first of the year, maybe as late as March. You just have to look at the timing of things. But that's kind of what we got going.
Any other
Anybody else?
questions?
All right, thank you.
All right, James Motran.
I think you've got our report. Just real quick, what we're working on right now is kind of our legislative agenda going into the next session. Some of our high points on that will be, since they do have a bunch of additional funding to divvy up, to see if we extend the county road grant program for another funding run. That's been very important to our area. Of course, passing the Grow Texas legislation for that additional infrastructure funding coming back into those energy sector areas like ours would also be good. The big hiccup on that has always been in the Senate, and it's been Senator Robert Nichols who's had an issue with it and really kept it from going. It's passed the House overwhelmingly each time. He has 3 legislative agenda items this session, and one of them is the extension of Prop 1, which is those severance taxes going to the state highway fund. And this year that was $3.6 billion, so that's been a lot of the additional funding that's available. Since that's up, I think there's an opportunity, I don't want to say hold somebody hostage, but at least a lot of leverage. If we're going to keep sending those severance tax dollars to the state highway fund, which by the way has been very good for us, then let's carve out a little piece of all these additional severances to send back to these energy impacted areas. So I think that'd be good. The other agenda item that he wants to pass, just as a note to you, is a $200 tax on all electric vehicles in the state on an annual basis. Since today they don't pay gas taxes, that they would pay that. So I think there's some workable room on some of those items, and hopefully that'll be a good deal. We have begun the process of forming our I-14 caucus with members across the state, which is a good opportunity for us to reach out, talk about energy issues as well. And I think ultimately where that will culminate is in having an advisory committee formed through TxDOT, like you have for I-27, where they're having to meet multiple times a year and continue working on implementation plans and all of this. Initially, we were very opposed to that at the time because it kind of prioritizes projects that sometimes shouldn't be prioritized. But if we're gonna do it for everybody else, I say let's do one that's good for us here too. And that'll give us the opportunity, because of course that includes Loop 338 on back through Midland and all of that. So we're gonna push forward with that as well. So again, those are sort of the draft things. We'll be voting on that in December. Those are not official yet, but those are some of the areas where we're working for additional funding in the session, so.
James, I thought the attendance at the annual meeting was very good. It typically is good, but I thought Ray Perriman did an excellent job on his coverage of the oil and gas industry and you know, the future of that, so.
Well, we
You should
thank
be
you and Mr.
commended
Crow for being there, and I think in your packet, we have the pictographed version. We decided the 9 pages of the report was too much for most people to read, so we baby-stepped it. And we've sent out about 400 of those so far, and we'll continue, we're sending those to all the members of the legislature. That'll be distributed on the first day of session on their desk, so. Good deal.
All right. Thank you, James. Larry, the city financials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You have the report in your packet today, but I'd like to highlight a few things on there if I may. The total assets for the month of September, which is of course the last month of our fiscal 2022 year, includes assets increasing by $1,104,487, with $68,706,322 being the total assets as of the end of the fiscal year. Total revenues year to date on page 2 is $12,582,608. Total expenditures year to date is $4,083,063. I might note that the business incentive payments to FMC Technologies, the $76,400, and to Nucera, $1,991,600, were charged in September to the expenditures and set up as payables at the end of the fiscal year and paid in early fiscal year 23, October, just so you know how that flowed through the process. As far as investments go, we did not purchase any new securities during September. However, we have purchased 2 securities in October, one for $1,195,000 and one for $1,200,000, both GO bonds with yields in excess of 4.5% in both cases. As a final point, we also are in process of purchasing one this afternoon for another $1 million that will exceed $4.5 million also, that matures in February of '24. So those will be reported in future periods, but just to give you an idea of what's upcoming that has happened since the end of September. Finally, the sales tax revenues. The ODC sales tax collections for November were $1,185,460, which is an increase of $81,596, or 7.39% when compared to November of '21, a year ago. On a fiscal year-to-date basis, the total collected for fiscal year 2023 year-to-date, which is the 2 months of October and November, was $2,329,784, which is an increase of $354,069, or 17.92% when compared to the first 2 months of last fiscal year. With that, I'd be happy to try to explain or answer any other questions that the board may have.
So just to clarify, because I did see the $2,068,000
Yes.
infrastructure grant on September, but how will that affect October and fiscal 2023?
Well, the $2,068,000 was set up as a payable at the end of the fiscal year, September 30. So the cash will actually be expended in October fiscal year 23, but the expenditure was recorded in fiscal year 22 when it was actually earned.
Excellent.
Anything else?
Motion to accept the financial report?
Second.
One more quick question. We had $33,286 in receivables. Do you remember what that was, Larry?
What's your interest receivable?
Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
On the bond securities, yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
A motion and a second to accept the financial report as presented. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, Ms.
Sure.
Muncy has another issue I'd like to discuss
Okay.
as well.
Thank you.
I'm addressing this under City Administrative Support Report. When we discussed an issue in September regarding the outstanding payments for the business challenge with UTPB, we had given them a deadline of September 30th of 2022. I received a packet yesterday for they only had one outstanding. We actually paid one out in September in the amount of 28,000 something, and so the only amount left was to Permian, and they produce leather purses, and they were slow to get it going due to COVID and then trying to get everything done. This is a picture of their product. They are also expanding out into leather work and interior design. But they submitted this, all the expenditures that they submitted for their remaining balance of $45,653.33 were expenditures that had been incurred by September 30th, 2022. I just didn't get all the paperwork from UTPB until yesterday. He had called me in October and said, they've spent the money, but they hadn't gotten me all the copies of the invoices. I said, I will ask the board if they want to honor that since you didn't get it to us by September 30th. But I would say you could only submit expenditures that had occurred by the winter as of September 30th, 22, and that is what they submitted. And Mr. Ryan Peckham with UTPB that oversees this project has vetted all those expenditures and say they meet the criteria of which they won the award from originally. So it's a question to the board of if we want to honor those since they were expended prior to 9/30/22.
What was the total amount again?
$45,653.33. They had actually spent $58,931, but they only had a remaining balance of their award of $45,000. So they've spent more than that.
So they earned the funds according to UTPB.
Yes.
And the decision that we made, a couple of months ago, I guess, was not to make any additional payments after the end of the fiscal year, September 30, right? Isn't that what we?
Yeah, I mean,
So the question at hand is, it appears this is a startup company, I mean, that's in business. We've got evidence that they're in business. They have produced the paperwork they needed. They earned the funds, but they didn't turn the paperwork in that matched up with the time frame that we had agreed to at the board. So I think the question is, what's the right thing to do? You know, what makes sense? I mean, I could probably argue both sides of it. One side of it would be, well, they didn't meet the deadline. They were negligent in doing that, and therefore, you know, we're not gonna give them the money. The other thing is, we have typically been supportive of new businesses and businesses growing jobs and capital investment in our community. They did earn it. You have issues from time to time with new companies and whatnot. So maybe they weren't negligent, they were just tardy. Any comments from anybody on the board?
I didn't really fully understand, because this was all prior to us coming on, but
Oh, I think I'm the only, were you on the board when we did that project? Betsy was the
as far as what this
chair.
was and how it was.
I say we pay it and say good riddance and get it off and not show up on our
So-
meetings.
Are there others that can come late and be like, well, you made it, I mean, is there anybody
No.
else?
There's
This is the last award winner to be paid out.
So,
There are two others that have submitted their final. They didn't spend, but they left a balance of like $1,000, each one of them. I can give you exact numbers if you want that, but they left a little bit of a balance, but they have not submitted anything else. So I would say, and they're done and,
So, we're not in a situation where if we make a special exception here, that we'll have to
No.
make other special exceptions?
Would you, Tim, kind of explain, like for?
Yeah, just,
so
This is
what
a-
is this, and how does
this
this
is
qualify under economic
Well, we
development?
couldn't call it the Shark Tank, but that's what it was. And we did it through UTPB, and then we did it 2 years, I think. Tyler, is
Yes.
that?
And it used,
think-
promotion funds. It
Yeah.
was not $1A, it was
And
promotion
so
funds.
we donated the prize money, and I think we donated $450,000 each year, right?
So had
Just
business,
advertising them?
yeah, businesses that
Yeah.
came in, they made proposals, that said, we want to do this is what it's going to cost.
And there was probably,
And there were winners.
yeah, there was probably
There were
20
non-winners.
20 entries in each one, and you paid the top 3, I think. And the first year it went real good. It's kind of like that Shark Tank you see on TV.
Yeah.
We couldn't say that, but, anyway, and then we ran into some issues on that second year, and that's why we hesitated in doing it the third year. And, but the people did the work and earned it, and I think, if I understood you, the paperwork may have gotten to UTPB, but he had to do all the qualifying to make sure it met the
well,
requirements.
it didn't get to him by September 30th,
Okay.
no. But he got it sometime in October, and he's reviewed all of it and signed
does.
off on it. We require them to do a form where he's signing off that it meets they have to turn in a business plan. That was all part of whether they got awarded or not. They turned in a business plan. The UTPB monitors that to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing according to the business plan. And so they are the ones that are responsible for referring back to us that it meets all the qualifications of what they did. And then we pay upon them doing it. And typically, we're just paying these because they'd already been awarded the deal. This was just a little odd because we'd asked for them to get them turned in before September 30th. but
Cindy, what was the range of awards that were made?
So these were, the last one that we did, they were all $100,000 each. And there was 4 of them.
And this business here, is it in Odessa?
Yes. Their address that they've listed is,
I think
their
they operate
address
out of-
is 2903 Bainbridge Drive.
I agree with Tim. I think we just need to go ahead and take care of it,
Yeah.
even though
mean,
it's delayed.
We've got an agreement with them.
Our agreement is with UTPB, so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's who we
I'm
went
hearing a
through to
motion
do the
from Tim
program.
and a
yeah.
second.
There we
So
go.
this will just be paid out of monthly expenses, not out of a grant request or anything like that?
This has actually already been accrued as an expense because the program, the awards were made in that year. I think it was actually the 2020 fiscal year end. So, the audit guidelines made us accrue it, so it's part of what's been sitting in accounts payable all this time. There is a little bit left over after we pay this out of about $6,000 that will be put back in as miscellaneous revenue to ODC.
Okay.
Is that all we have left in like an accrued payable?
Yes, and that's gone,
Accrued
yes.
expenses, okay, good.
Other than month-to-month type things like we do normally.
Any other discussion? Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, Casey, request from Pedicardio.
Yes, good afternoon, Board. I received a request, and I've been in contact with Dr. Nagasalu about this. He was hoping that he would be further along. He's actually in the middle of litigation with his contractor. They're having to sue his contractor. He's asking for a 6-month extension. On top of having to sue his previous contractor, his new contractor he's having issues with, and this is for the building on 520 North Lincoln. It's the old Nurses Unlimited building. If you go by, he has made progress. It's a 20,000 square foot building. He's got about 80% of it on the bottom level has been stuccoed. He's doing all new plumbing. He's ripped it down to the studs. He had to do asbestos abatement. He's got that done. He's hopefully this week, he's hoping that his new AC units will be put in. He had some problems with his plumbing contractor. That took over a month to get his permit on that, but that has been done. So he's made significant progress. There's just been some hangups that have held him back. And so he's hoping that he can get it completed in the next 6 months. He also, in his email, just for full transparency, asked for additional funding because of inflation, and I told him that wasn't allowable. It states it in the grant, but that we could ask for an extension, and that would be based on y'all's approval.
And your impression is this is about, I mean, it's gonna happen.
Yes,
There's
it's-
no question in your mind.
No, sir, and he's also, so his intention is for the bottom level to be some sort of restaurant or coffee shop. He's been in talks with several. He's really hoping to bring somebody in to run the bottom 10,000 square feet, and then his office will be on the second. It's gonna be a beautiful building. It's a great addition. It's right on the corner of Lee and 6th. It's really gonna be great. It's one of the few buildings downtown that has no parking issue, as they have a very large parking included in their land. So I have no doubts. I've been in contact with him. He's been very communicative with me and very transparent on the whole process. He actually reached out to me back in February when he went to sue his contractor, just with real concerns that he wouldn't be in compliance with this. So we kind of waited. It is up this month. We waited, and we were just hoping that we would be further along, but we're just not there. So he's asking for 6 months.
This would extend the contract through May?
I beg your pardon?
This would extend the contract through May?
Yes.
Any thoughts?
I don't have a problem.
I don't have a problem with it.
Make a motion to extend.
Have a motion, have a
Second
second.
the motion.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you all very much.
All right, discussion and consider recommendation of compliance consultant committee. Is that you?
Partially.
Who else is on that committee?
Me.
Okay, which one of you wants to?
Have you heard anything? I haven't heard anything.
First, yeah, well, after what you said, last meeting was, can we get anybody else to bid this? I reached out to Whitley Penn. Just called the Midland office and told them who I was and what I'd like, and they transferred me to David Heath, who apparently oversees all of the auditing for West Texas. I was on the phone with him in about 5 minutes. He goes, man, we would love to bid that for ODC. And so, and did a little more research, it looks like to have somebody like Whitley Penn do it, we would have to close out, is that right, Cindy? Close out this RFP, start over, open it up. I haven't heard anything from Axiom, but I didn't try to call Chris either.
I haven't heard anything at all from him.
I think Cindy said
So
she
we've had,
reached
Cindy,
out.
have you heard anything from
We've had 2
him?
proposals, correct? And then we were looking at Axiom doing a
Test on it.
test, taking some of our historical information and running it through their system. But we've not had any communication. You've tried multiple times, is what you've indicated to me.
Yes, I was calling, and I sent an email on October the 17th, and I still got no response.
And I think that one of the things that you indicated to me that you had sent the information to Whitley Penn, right? As far as the original
The
RFP that
original
went out, they were
RFP.
on that list, and should have gone to the Odessa office, follow-up email, as I recall, because when we didn't get a
No.
proposal, or
So-
how'd that work?
So the proposals were due on August I have a note here somewhere. On they were issued in July, they were due August 3rd, that's when we opened them. So, the next step would be You either choose one of the two proposals that were turned in, or you reject them all, and we can go back out for RFP again. And but we sent this to the Odessa location of Whitley Penn, Ron Kirby, Randy Silhon, Turner Ferguson, Armstrong Backus, Fixture Moore, Weaver, White, Semiego, Campbell, that's out of Stanton, KWCO PC in Odessa, and Germer and Company CPAs in Odessa.
Okay,
So
so.
we did,
Yeah,
our purchasing department made phone calls and tried to follow up with emails if they didn't get any answer or messages returned, to see why. That's just for me to give y'all that information. That's done subsequent to the opening date of the RFP. So we didn't do that prior to, no.
yeah, so at this point, with the additional contact that Chris has made, we could select one of the two proposals that we have. We could reject those, but in rejecting them, then we could rebid those, and we could narrow down the group to whatever we want to, but inclusive of
From
Whitley
what
Penn.
Cindy told me, you guys can't lobby certain ones. Is there any reason why, I have no problem taking the project on and taking that list that she has and following up. In talking to David, he goes, man, I have no emails, I didn't have any voicemails that I could find, because Odessa office is a very small office. He said, but yeah, we'd love to do this, and so I wouldn't mind following up with some of those other companies from Cindy's list and just say, hey, a little more personal touch.
Once we reissue the RFP, he can talk about the fact that we have an RFP out there, but under our guidelines, and in the RFP, it states that any technical questions should come to me. Any questions regarding the RFP process goes to the purchasing director. If he wants to make direct notification to them that the RFP's out there, that's okay. We just can't, we as employees cannot solicit certain firms to participate in the RFP or bid process.
Is that the intent? Just to try to make sure that they.
Right,
make a
just to make
proposal?
sure, make them aware
Or-
and ask them to give us a proposal.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if I would need to do that before we issue the RFP out to them, I could do that.
I've got something to ask on, wasn't one of the candidates not a professional accountant?
Yes.
That was Axiom, who we've not heard back from.
Okay, because according to our agreements, it has to be an independent third party with professional accounting qualifications.
Well, they have a CPA that.
It doesn't matter. He hadn't gotten back to us.
Right, he doesn't matter. I'm just saying that if
I
we
just
had
want to let
somebody.
y'all know that, we could take it out of our contracts, but we have contracts that are signed that are outstanding.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talked about as that was going on was, and this came because we were allowing him to review information for one of our grantees, is that, it's an age-old practice with CPA firms that any information that they obtain in any services they're doing are professional services, and they're required to maintain confidentiality of that information. So, if you're not using a CPA firm, I would encourage us to have a separate confidentiality agreement with whoever's chosen to do that service, so that you have that same protection for the companies that they're going out and auditing.
It's a moot point right now, but.
It is, but so if we're gonna go out through the process again, that's what I would say we need to do.
Okay.
I think in light of that, I would entertain a motion regarding the two proposals that we did receive.
I would motion that we close out those RFPs, to decline them, close them out, and start the process again.
I'll second that.
Before you vote, just before you vote, keep in mind, I'm not, that's fine, that's what we need to do. I think we need to follow that up with the continuance of the agreement with Weaver as it stands now, because they are in the process of doing 4 or 5 right now, so.
Didn't we extend that for a period of time?
Yes.
Are we still in that extension period?
We didn't give it an additional time frame. We said any ones that they have started, which brings me to another point. They had not started on Glazers. Glazers has sent in a request for their next payment. So I need verification to tell them to go ahead and start that process so that they can get that one done. So I guess what I'm saying is that this, when you do a new RFP, I don't know how tight a deadline you really need on that, so maybe giving people more time will be better, because we shouldn't have any really coming up until we get into like March, April of next year.
What tax deadlines are coming up? Or is that even relevant for these big firms that have audit
The big
departments?
firms, probably not. I mean, they have deadlines year-round with different audit year-ends and stuff like that, so.
So if I could clarify the motion, which would be to reject the 2 bids with the idea that we would continue the work with Weaver until further notice, let's just say it that way, and
I would
that we,
handle
that
it
we
two
would.
separate. Let's wrap up the RFP, and then let's do
Well-
another motion for that, just to be clear.
We can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't, when we rejected the proposal from Weaver, that just doesn't cut everything off, you know,
Right.
with them.
That's why I was
That's
just,
what
let's
I
do
wanna
it in
make sure.
2, and then we'll tackle Weaver as a
I'm fine with
separate,
that. I'm fine with that.
item, and do exactly what you're talking about.
So everybody understand that the motion would be to reject the 2 proposals that we have at this point.
Yes.
Yes.
And do I have a second?
You got a second.
Have a second from
Tim
Dr.
was a second.
Oh, Tim was? Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, additional motion?
I would motion that, they seemed okay when we talked to them again, that we continue our month-to-month agreement with Weaver, and any contracts that are coming up, that they go ahead and start into those. I mean, we have to continue business as usual, and, you know, of course, once they start into them, we'll allow them to finish those, even if we go with another contractor.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you. We will work on getting the new RFP put
Okay.
together. Do
So-
y'all want to review it again before it goes back out?
It's gonna be similar to what we sent previously.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I'll get with
we
you and get
all
that
do?
list, so I can reach out to them.
We may want to add something in regarding a confidentiality. I'll get with legal if we
Okay.
need to add in a confidentiality clause if they are not a CPA firm.
Norma, let the minutes reflect that we're going to, that we will go out for RFPs again on this issue. That Mr. Crow is planning to contact whoever's on that list to encourage them to make a proposal. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, let's see, now we have the report from the Marketing Contractor Committee.
Yes, we met, Dr. and Chris and I met, and we actually met with the 3 people that turned in their proposals. It was Craig Van Amberg, and it was Christy Calicut with Current, is that
Current Media?
And then Savannah with Hanover.
Hancock.
Hancock.
All 3 were very impressive. I have to say that after I think it was unanimous on all 3 of us, that Christie's proposal was probably the most current, up-to-date on the digital I think that's but kinda tilted us, that's what tilted me that direction, I'll put it that way. So we are, our recommendation to the board is to, go with Christie, Calicut with concurrent, or current. And, Christie worked with Greg, that for 7 or 8 years before she started her own deal. They have discussed, I have notified all three what I was gonna propose today, and we still, told them it still has to go through a couple other hoops, but, I think it'd be no problem at all for Christie and Craig to work together, and they had been talking together the whole time. I think it's a very cordial deal, but I think it's in the best interest of ODC, our board, to make this change. So that's our recommendation. I've got copies of all three, and I'll get them to Norma. And if anyone else wants to see, y'all got copies too.
Yeah.
Contact the doctor or Chris, and if you want to look over them, and we'll go from there. Now, we go through the end of the year with Craig, and then that transition will be taken over. And I did discuss that with Christie, and she said that she thought that would be very easy to do, so.
Okay, so we have a motion from the committee, probably doesn't need a second, since it's from the committee. Any additional discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Tim. Thanks, Chris and Dr. Kurt, for your work. Now we have, the next item on the agenda is discuss and consider compliance monitoring review policies for economic development incentive performance agreements. I think what we were trying to accomplish here was whether or not we wanted, whoever does our audits, do we want those, do we want that information going to the compliance committee? Do we want it to go to the compliance committee only when there are exceptions? Or do we want all of that stuff and then, otherwise go through, come straight to the board, or otherwise everything just go to the board? So any comments in that regard? I think my recollection is that, Chris, you raised the issue several months ago, and we basically said it's gonna go to the compliance committee if there are exceptions. And otherwise, it's gonna come straight to the board. Or do you have any preference for a change on that now?
Well, it came because back in 2020, we passed Resolution 2020R-2 that said anytime our auditor goes in and does a contract review for payment, that if there are no discrepancies in the contract, then the city attorney could direct that straight to the board and go around compliance committee and come straight to us for that. So the question comes in, I guess, do we need to give a better definition of what discrepancies are? Our last contract didn't meet the grant amount. You'd think that alone by itself would be a discrepancy. And then in addition to that, we had to go back 4 or 5 years in pulling up capital investment amounts to get even close to that amount. You'd think that would be a discrepancy as opposed to in the contract period. So I think we need some clarification in here. If we want to keep that resolution in there, that's cool, that's fine. But I think we need some more direction for our legal team as far as what a discrepancy is, so they'll know better whether or not to take that to compliance committee or bring it straight to us. In that particular case, I think the compliance committee would have seen those discrepancies and probably asked a lot more questions.
I would say that if you, because we have in our contract a provision now for pro rata resolution of those grants and grantees who do not meet the total requirements, that's really not a discrepancy. It's not an exception. It's actually called for in the contract. In my opinion, a discrepancy or an exception would be where the information is being challenged. Our auditor or whoever is performing that function is saying, we can't match up with their numbers and whatnot. That was the impression that I was under. I I know we're gonna talk a little bit about the, what's gonna qualify as capital expenditures in the next item on the agenda. So I would leave that to that discussion. But to me, since we already have a provision in the contract that says if you don't meet the criteria, if you partially meet it, then it's gonna be pro rata. If all their information's good, there's no reason for the auditor to question it, then to me, it's not an exception. I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
We're just going by the guidelines of the contract.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Like if we don't, like with 99.9% on the Acero deal, we go to, you prorate it and you pay it. Is that right?
Right, but in the past, we haven't allowed expenses prior to the start of the contract date to be included for qualification.
I don't know that we haven't done that.
I don't think we have.
I don't know if we have or haven't, to be honest.
I don't know. I can't answer
I
that.
don't think it's, yeah.
I think this
project
I think
expenses
this
are fine.
project is such an exception that you might draw a conclusion that doesn't match up with the norm. So I don't know about
Right,
that.
we're just trying to clarify for
Yeah, yeah,
future
yeah.
contracts, so to minimize some of this.
So what if we took the position that as long as our auditor, has no concern regarding the information is what it is. If it falls short, then, and it's, there's no question with regard to, it either is or it isn't, and we have the language in the contract that we pay it pro rata, there's no reason for the compliance committee to review that. Would that be reasonable?
We would probably just need to make sure then that we address some of these issues, kind of like what we're talking about today, in the contract, so that it's clear for the auditor.
Exactly, I get that. So let's go ahead at this point, let's move on to the next item, so we can cover both these at the same time, which is discussion to clarify qualified capital expenditures in the grant. I go back to, when we're talking about what qualifies and what doesn't, the expenditures associated with completing their capital project is the only thing that's in question. It has nothing to do with, in my opinion, with the jobs, because we've done a lot of clarification on FTEs. We did a lot of work on that. So really what we're talking about is capital expenditures. And if, a company, I used the example, if a company wants to do a project and they want to apply for a grant, they don't want to disclose before they acquire a piece of property that they're going to do this project, because otherwise it puts them at a competitive disadvantage possibly. Then why wouldn't we allow those expenditures? I would think that we could put some language in a contract easily if we want to, and if we could do it on every contract, we could do it by exception. Maybe we could work, Melanie and the legal department could work together and say, all right, here's some simple language we can put in there that says we'll allow, as far as capital expenditures, we'll allow these items that happen prior to the execution of the agreement, as long as they don't fall more than X period of time. Maybe that's 24 months before, 18 months before, 30 months before. Maybe we do that on a case-by-case basis, but maybe we have some boilerplate language already developed for that kind of thing. And it's only gonna happen on a really, really large project, I think. So what if we did it in that regard?
Could we have some kind of wording that says, if you want to use expenses like that are gonna be prior to the contract effective date, that they just need to be approved before we do the contract?
Yeah.
Do you see what
Have
I'm
a
saying?
start date on your
You know what I mean?
contract.
So that way it's not a surprise to us when it comes up to the
Well,
audit.
well-
They say, look, we've got this much in expenses, we've kind of already accrued that we'd like to use next year in our first grant, then you're taking all of that out of there
But you're gonna do that.
before the contract's even done.
Okay, but you're gonna do that prior to them being awarded the grant? Well, it makes that information
know.
public.
I mean-
Well, like we said, let me
information
ask one
record.
question. So we can go into executive session for an item like that, can't we, to discuss a grant contract. So if we go into an executive session and they bring those items up, then we're not taking it into public information.
We can go into executive session if we're talking about the financial aspects of a contract that we're still negotiating.
Exactly.
Instead of, like in this case, it's already been approved, I mean, the case we talked about earlier today, it already been approved by the council. But for the negotiations to get the contract, yes, we can go into executive session.
That's what we used to do.
I mean, it
makes
can
sense.
just be made part of the
Contract.
negotiation process. That's something more for Tom to,
Yeah,
think
and we
about.
could basically give him a heads on every one of these going forward. Just make sure that you ask him, hey, are you gonna, if you're gonna apply for a grant that's associated with investment, are there gonna be any expenses that you've already incurred that you're gonna want to
or
be
that you're
credited for?
planning to incur.
Yeah.
Yeah, over the
Or
next year
plan to,
before that,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I have a question. This is from a past thing. I mean, are we supposed to go back and read the contracts completely to see if they're in compliance for their payment when they come in, or is that up to the auditor? And in the event the auditor may have missed something, and we also maybe missed it, and I know they look at the FTEs, I know they look at the wages and everything, but the compliance on investment, do they look at that?
Cindy, wouldn't we typically give, at this point, Weaver the contract information? Because that's the only way they can understand what the criteria is, right?
Yes, I mean, they're not testing compliance until the contract's been agreed upon and
Yeah.
executed.
Right.
So based on what the contract says is what they follow. If it's ambiguous or flexible or whatever, then they're subject to interpretation by us.
Does that help, Larry?
Yeah, a little bit, but in this instance, a year to construct on the property, what does that mean? You're not in compliance if you don't, but this has happened, and it's there in black and white. If in a year you haven't constructed on property, you're out of compliance.
Yeah, and we haven't defined what constructed means. Does that mean they've broken ground? Does that
That's
mean?
the question here.
Because they've done a bunch of work out there, and
What?
they've plugged wells and.
Right.
Constructed
So-
improvements, cause or constructed improvements within 1 year of the effective
Well,
date.
then plugging wells is causing improvements,
Yeah.
I would argue.
And then they're doing all the mediation on the dirt and stuff out there.
Well, says constructed on the properties, that means something happened.
Or
on the
caused
property.
improvements.
Pardon?
Or caused improvements.
And cause improvements to be constructed on the properties.
Okay.
That's your big and/or question.
I mean, that's an ambiguity, no
Yes.
doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have to have a
My
pretty
question
clear
is,
definition of what
is it-
that means.
is it my job to read through this every year when somebody comes up or is it the
Yes.
auditors?
It's the
It-
audit.
No,
It is also your job.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
But you're gonna get a copy of the contract in the packet, so
Yeah.
you can verify, what the auditor's reporting.
But the question is,
Yes and no.
do we want to define
I
what
think that-
constitutes?
I think that needed to be better defined on construction.
Well,
And
and
so,
we can argue this till the hell freezes over, but we wrote the contract. That's what they're gonna tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we wrote the
Absolutely.
contract,
Well,
right, but
yes and no. I mean, so look at the contract we looked at today. Did we write that? Or did
Well,
P1 write that?
Yeah.
I
In
mean,
well,
that,
that's
in that
by the-
contract,
yeah.
they stated that they're not doing a construed against the drafter kind
but
of
when I
thing.
say,
So,
I'm sorry,
I don't think that that's as much an issue with that contract because we've contracted around it.
Right.
yeah.
But in another one, it is our contract. Anything that we don't define is on us.
Therefore, we should define it better.
Well, if the question is, have you constructed anything on this property, and the answer is no.
I mean, what rises to the level of constructed?
Well,
If
Larry-
I've
Definition.
laid a foundation, if I've moved dirt,
Nothing.
how would you define it? How do we wanna define it?
Larry
It says
asked,
constructed.
Larry asked them directly last time, are there any equipment out there?
Yeah.
There was only stakes. You know,
Put
wooden
stakes
stakes
in
to stake
Staked.
out there, that's the
And a
only thing.
surveyor did
only sign
that,
of
so.
anything.
Yeah, I know that, only thing I know that's been done was the plugging of the wells, expense of all that was, I think was included in that. I think there was 4 or 5 wells, and then they've spent a long time doing the environmental on the dirt,
Yeah.
even to the point that I didn't know we had Google Earth maps, but supposedly
Yeah.
we did way back when. And it showed where a lot of the oil wells and stuff, that there was standing water and stuff, because we didn't have environmental people out there like we do today.
Right.
So they were going over in those areas, going through to extent to make sure all that stuff
I mean, that's investment in the property,
And also
but that's
the-
not
and
construction.
also-
Right, but
Design
we
work.
wrote in the contract construction.
Yeah.
So,
And it says construction and not construction or.
So I think it comes down to a better definition of, we need to better define construction.
I agree with that.
I agree. What would you give, Larry, for the definition of constructed?
I hadn't totally digested until I have this answer, but I'll get you an answer.
Well,
I mean, I would think at least broken ground
Well,
would be
why don't we
nice.
do this in order to, we're kind of making this sausage in public. Why don't we agree, or can we agree, that we're going to determine exactly what exceptions are or discrepancies are, so that we determine what's gonna go to compliance and what's not. Okay, we'll come up with something for that. And then let us work on, and I'm looking at you, Melanie, you can't see me, but,
He does that a lot.
we'll work
That's
on
'cause
some better language with regard to something that says, preparation of the property, design work, construction, and so we'll have a better idea of what that is, so that we can, going forward, it'll be a lot clearer. And we'll incorporate this idea that we're talking about with regard to if there are any pre-contract, effective date expenses that are going to be capitalized, that they will have to be approved in advance.
Maybe we want them scheduled
Yeah,
and attached to
Yeah.
the
To the
contract. That's the only
contract or
way to
something.
make it,
I neither condemned or accepted, because
so like the
the same thing,
pre-contract
it's a conflict,
expenses
so what
disclosed on
you're
schedule,
talking
blah,
about
blah,
is
blah.
the capitalization and the things like that. There's several things that we need to figure out a way to
Sure.
maneuver those when they come up,
Right.
because they're always gonna come
Right.
up. We
So,
need a tool.
I don't think we need to take action on either of these items right now. We will work to pull something together next month or following month that says, all right, going forward, here's what we're gonna do.
See if legal has something they wanna recommend to our form contract that we're working on anyway, and
All right. All right, so we're down to, anything else on that? I don't wanna cut anybody off. ODC committee and officer reports, the partnership is, gonna meet, Odessa Partnership, trying to meet on December the 1st. Tax incentive won't meet, or has not met, yet. Compliance, did we have a compliance committee meeting that we need any information from, or know that we had one?
I think so.
I
Okay.
think we have them.
I think we had one this week.
Advertising, we've already covered that. The downtown, grants design review board, Larry, anything happening there?
No,
Okay. All right, citizen comments on non-agenda items. Are there any citizens who want to comment on non-agenda items at this time? I see and hear none. So the next date for the meeting is December the 8th, unless a number of you have a problem with that.
Do we, in the past, we've not met in December. And then in the past, we had one meeting for November, December towards the end, so we've already passed that. But I don't know if we have that much to address on December 8th.
And then that's because it's December's a tough time to try to get meetings going.
We did meet last December, but we did not meet in January.
Oh, okay, that's what we did.
Well,
I would leave that up to
Because it's
accounting and
typically
legal,
fine with
Yeah,
whether or not
we
we need to.
play it by ear. If there's not a lot on the agenda, then we'll push it
Tentatively
back to
the
January. Yeah, so right now
I
it's
have no
the
problem
8th, but
with the
we'll
8th.
give you plenty of time to know whether we're gonna have a meeting or not. With that, no other business, we're adjourned. Thank you all.